Welcome everyone to Take Charge for April of 2019. So we've got an interesting topic, a very interesting topic in store for you today. Marijuana. It's been around for a very, very long time. It's also been illegal for a very, very long time, which has been kind of interesting because there's a lot of people out there who say that a lot of good things, a lot of good health things can come from marijuana. But in a lot of places, because it's illegal, it's made it very, very difficult to study to confirm all these claims that are surrounding beneficial health options. Well, marijuana, as we all know, is now becoming legalized. So we're going to be able to take a look at all these health benefits and find out, are they true? Are they not? What are all the ins and outs for that? So we're very lucky today to have our medical director, Dr. Paul O, and he's going to be talking to us about the health aspects of marijuana. Dr. O?
Thank you, Rob, and thank you all of you, to all of you for coming on out before a holiday-long weekend. So it's delightful to see all of you here today. I'm sure you've got some interesting questions, perhaps, some stories to share, or you're just wondering, curious. And I'm sure that there's some people in this audience with tremendous insight and expertise into this topic. You may not want to declare who you are right now, but I'm sure it will become evident. This could be a very large topic, a very long session, but to find our lane within Take Charge on this topic, I think what the tack that we've chosen to take is around how does cannabis cross over with respect to the heart? Okay, there are many places where we could go to around pain and the brain and other places. That would be subjects for other talks. But for today, we're going to focus on what's going on with the heart and this new phenomenon of cannabis in our society. And I also get to put on a little bit of my pharmacology hat. Some of you may know that some of my training after I did my medical school was in the area of pharmacology or clinical pharmacology. That's how drugs and medicines interact with the body. And that's one of the areas that I'd like to share with you by the end of this session is, although we think of it as it's just a plant, don't worry about it, maybe there's some things that we should be aware of, just like any plant. So thank you. So by the end of this session, maybe you've already got this expertise, or maybe it'll be something new that we'll share. The pharmacology, what happens when substances from cannabis get into us? What are the major components that we should be talking about? So we should understand the difference between THC and CBD by the end of this 45 minutes or so. Okay, so that's one takeaway. If you already know those things, terrific. If you haven't, then maybe that's going to be your takeaway. What about some of the evidence for or against? Is it perfectly safe for the heart? I'm going to kind of lead you on and say, well, maybe there are some effects on the heart that we should be aware of, but nobody really talks about it. When I see the ads in the bus shelter, it might be, please call this number to get your cannabis. The next bus shelter might be, don't drive, by the way, because you can't drive high. But nobody talks about what the effects of cannabis might be on the heart. So that might be worth spending some time on. And here's my bonus item for you. If you listen very carefully, you'll be able to walk away from tonight with this very important insight. What's the difference between a Kush and a sativa? Does anybody know the answer to that right now? None of you want to really disclose that, do you? I bet somebody in this room knows, but that's going to be a bonus item, okay? Hang in there. So, here's some stories. The framework for this discussion is actually based upon real exchanges that I've had with some of you or your colleagues in this program. So maybe you're going to be reflected in one of these four stories. Story number one. I remember seeing this gentleman downstairs. He came in for his stress test. He told me he uses an oil twice a day. And he was feeling something coming on. So he lit up a cigarette in the parking lot, a cigarette of cannabis, and took a little hit. And then showed up for his stress test. He said he was feeling okay. Should we have any concerns? Should you have any concerns? Is that okay to do? Let's ask that question. You can ponder that one. How about this one? If I was working in the emergency department and I saw a 35-year-old guy come in who's having this terrible chest pain, or he might have just passed out on the ground, the only thing we really know about him is that he smokes a lot of cannabis. Is there any relationship, do you think, between the cannabis use and what's happening to him? What does the medical literature say to us about that? How about this guy? A 75-year-old man who said one day he ended up in the hospital kind of confused, a little out of his mind. His heart was really racing. Is this cannabis related? It doesn't sound like anything we've ever heard about. Let's see. And how about this question that I am asked occasionally? The 70-year-old woman who may be represented in this room, she's living with some heart disease, she has diabetes, she has high blood pressure, her family stresses her out, frankly, as well. She's on a lot of different heart medications, and she asked me, what's the best kind of pot for me? I might just refer her to the website and they'll help her choose. But should we have a little more nuanced discussion about that? How's this sound? This is the agenda for this afternoon, or for this evening, and this is going to be the guide, okay? We'll go through a bit of these stories in more detail, explore a little bit of the medical literature that supports some of these things, and then we'll have an interesting discussion, I am sure. Okay? You with me? You still want to be here? Yes. Okay. Anybody feel that the RCMP is going to come in and break this up? This is okay for us to talk about this. In fact, it's very important for us to talk about it. Okay, let's do a little bit of Cannabis 101. That is, let's go to some of the basics about this stuff. Beautiful, green, leafy plant. Everyone's seen this plant? Recognize it from television shows only, right? That's the only way you recognize this. Maybe it's in your windowsill. Maybe it's under your hydroponic lamp. Maybe. That's okay too. But what do we know about this plant? So we know that they grow under interesting conditions, feed them lots of light and water and nutrients, and they will grow. And it's at the very tip of these plants, the flowers or the so-called buds, and you've heard that word before, of the female plants in particular. Women, you have the power in cannabis. It's only female plants that actually give us the interesting stuff. And at the very tip of the flowers are these interesting little structures called trichromes. And from there are expressed little droplets of magic, so I'm told. The crystallized secretions. Inside those little droplets, we find the magical chemicals, THC, CBD, and about 500 other things. But it's when you gather those crystals and purify them in some way, or take the flower bud and just burn those crystals, that's where the drug kind of effects happen. There are two major chemicals of interest, all right? You've heard of this stuff called THC. The long chemical name for this is delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. There is the THC part of that word. So the short form for this you've heard is THC. It's relevant. It's kind of like the percent alcohol. When you go to the liquor store, you know beer has how much percent alcohol? 5%, the experts say. And wine would have 12, 13%. And if you bought a bottle of spirits, of vodka or whiskey, what would that be? 40%. So you know it very well, right? And you know how to titrate. You wouldn't drink whiskey the same way you would drink a pint of beer, or would you? No, you probably wouldn't. But did you know that the cannabis that you buy, one is not like another? It differs widely in the amount of THC that there is. And just like alcohol, you would need to know that to choose one wisely, the one that might be right for you. I'm not saying that it is right for you, but it might be, and you should know that. On the other side, and this is the stuff that is of interest to some people, this is the stuff that may alter what's going on in your head, and people kind of seek that out. On the other side, there's this chemical called cannabidiol, C, B, and D in there, CBD. This stuff is not active in the brain. It kind of balances out the effects of THC and may have some other interesting effects on the body, okay? Those are the two main things that are talked about. And if you buy something from the store or online from the store, These are the two main things that you're going to be looking for to say, what is this product that I am getting? But just to let you know that there's 400 at least other things that come in the plant, because the plant is very, very complex. There's a whole lot more if you actually choose to burn the stuff, because all kinds of other things get generated. And then there's this other interesting stuff I just like talking about, the terpenes. Who has heard of terpenes? Anybody? A couple of you. This is the stuff, if I say cannabis and ask you to imagine the smell of a cannabis cigarette, can you do that? Anybody who has smelled a cannabis cigarette, you know it. My friend, yes? No, never, not you. But others. I must admit, I went to Amsterdam last year on an exploratory trip. It was research only. But as my wife and I walked through the red light district and past the coffee shops, you couldn't help but inhale the terpenes. They were wafting out of the coffee shops. We didn't stop. Honest, we didn't stop, but you could smell the terpenes. So just like a wine may have the fragrance of a good oak, a leather, a smoky flavor, cannabis is characterized by its terpene content. Good? THC, CBD, the terpenes. You with me? Okay. So why are we interested in this stuff from a medical perspective, potentially? So THC interacts with a receptor called the cannabinoid receptor. And they're all over the body. Some of them are located in the brain, no surprise. And if THC gets up into the brain, like if you smoke something, it gets very rapidly into the bloodstream, delivered up to the brain. And when those receptors get triggered, it's going to start to change how your brain or mind works. You may become relaxed, or you may become excited. You may calm down, you may develop delusions, you may become paranoid, you probably will get hungry, and it may actually help with nausea. This is why some people with cancer on chemotherapy may be using a marijuana cigarette to control the nausea, because it can actually help by interacting with those receptors. On the other hand, CBD, as we said, is kind of the balancing substance. It doesn't hit the receptor directly, but it changes how THC might affect that receptor. So if you've got a lot of CBD around, then you don't have so much of the THC effect on the brain. So it's going to modulate, smooth things out. And this is the stuff where people are really wondering, are there really some good medical effects? As Rob already introduced, that we don't have really great research about this yet, but there is a growing body of literature that talks about how some people might be using products with a lot of CBD to help with pain, for instance, or to control seizures, or other neurologic conditions, or inflammation in the body. All right? So I'm not pushing anybody to say you should be running out and getting this, but this is why there is a lot of interest. And you see that it matters which product that you're getting. If you really want to use cannabis for pain, then it's probably going to be one with the CBD stuff in it and not the THC that's kind of interacting with your brain. Does that make sense? So it matters which substance. We've already moved the pendulum along, perhaps, with this conversation. The other thing is that it matters a lot on how you use the substance, right? So when we say cannabis, we often think, well, it's all the same plant and people smoke it, don't they? Well, some people smoke the leaves, and of course that does nothing, right? Because there's no active substance in there. It's only when you get some flowers and when you get the trichromes and stuff. If you actually get some of that stuff and you smoke it, the advantage of that, and maybe some of the danger of it, is that you burn it, it gets into your lungs and gets taken up into the bloodstream very, very rapidly. It gets up into the brain very, very rapidly. So if you're looking for something to change the chemistry in your head, this is the most rapid way of doing so. But just be aware of those kinds of problems, right? The other thing is that if you burn stuff, burning is not a good thing. Inhaling smoke, I'm afraid, is not a good thing. That the byproducts of burning stuff is lots of chemicals that you probably don't want in your body. They don't belong there. And just like burning a cigarette is a bad thing for you, burning a marijuana cigarette is also probably bad for you. So that's why some people turn to vaping. So you heat it up, but you don't burn it. You still get this rapid hit of chemicals into your body, but at least you don't get the burn products, all right? There is a large interest as well around oral products. So you can take those chemicals off the crystals off the top of the plant. You can purify those crystals and mix it into an oil. So then this is a little bit more predictable in terms of what you get. If you smoke on something, it depends on how you smoke the thing, how deeply you inhale, how long you hold it. It changes the amount that actually gets into your system. But if you take a drop of something and you actually ingest it, it's a little more predictable, just like the medicines that you might take. Again, I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just trying to explain the stuff. The effects are going to take a little bit longer though, right? Because it's got to get into your system, travel through the gut, get absorbed, travel around the body, eventually make it to the brain or elsewhere before it has its effects. So this is why there are oil preparations available. And the interesting thing, of course, in the fall, we're going to have availability, at least commercially, of all kinds of other products. Maybe you already know a source for where you can get a nice brownie. Maybe. I don't want to hear those stories. Okay. So the stuff, whether you smoke it or eat it or whatever, the chemicals are actually, we call them soluble in lipids, meaning that they get into your fat tissue and they hang around there, probably for a week. And this is why, this controversy about roadside testing is really quite difficult, because nobody knows what to measure, right? You can't measure the THC directly. That's not so easy unless we're doing lots of blood sampling. You can't really do a breath test like the way you would with alcohol. So people are turning to these urine tests to measure some byproducts. But it matters a lot in terms of how you got the things. And if you've gotten some secondhand exposure, it's actually quite possible that you'll put things out in your urine that can last for days, even though you yourself have not used the product. So it makes it very confusing for law enforcement to actually measure whether you've gotten something or not. Okay, boy, that's confusing. Here's some more confusing stuff that you're supposed to know. Because theoretically, all of us are able to go out and buy this stuff right now, but nobody's taught us anything about it. We talked about the difference between THC and CBD. If you're going to buy a dry plant, then it's going to be labeled as a certain percentage of the plant is THC by how much dry plant there is, or CBD. If you get the oil, it'll be milligrams per mil of the oil. And if you get a capsule, it's a milligram, just like any of your other medicines. Man, this is confusing, because you gotta be sure of exactly what you're getting. That's not all. With the plants, it matters what kind of plant that you've got. And in the people that know, they talk about different strains. Way back when, about 5,000 years ago, there were two major kinds of cannabis plants. One of them was called Cannabis indica. Another one was called Cannabis sativa. They're different. Like the indica plant in northern India, in the mountains, they grew something called a Kush plant in the Kush mountains. Lower to the ground because it's so cold. They're huddling together near to the ground. Theoretically, it has a little bit less THC, more CBD, so a little bit more balanced kind of product. And the thought would be that this would be something that would let you be kind of relaxed with this kind of product. All right? On the other hand, there are these sativa plants. Sativa, stimulating, tall. If any of you watch Narcos Mexico or any of the drug things from Hawaii, from the tropical places, these are the tall things that are taller than a cornfield of cannabis. And if you get this stuff, it's supposed to be desirable because it gives you things that make your mind go, make you creative. We hear about people in Hollywood that this is the way that you start your day to get yourself creative juices kind of flowing. I'm not advocating this for anybody, but that's the kind of difference. So it matters which one that you actually get. You with me? Why does this matter? Because if you log on to the Ontario Cannabis Store it starts to ask you these questions. It says, are you new to cannabis? We're here to help. But you got to be able to answer these questions. What kind of strain do you want? Do you want a sativa or an indica? And you say, what? How much THC would you like? Would you like 2%, 5%, 10%, or 20%, or more? And you have to know what the difference of those things would be. And how much CBD would you like? And how many terpenes would you like? What flavor of terpene is on your plate? How would you like it? Do you want to smoke it? Do you want to have an oil? Do you want to have a capsule? How much would you like? Please enter your credit card number here, and we're happy to ship it. So this is kind of frightening to me, because that's all you need is a credit card number, and away you go. Do we as consumers know enough? And I did this chat last week at a cardiac conference, and I challenged the group to say, do the medical practitioners know enough? And I think the consensus is, at least from the medical side, we don't know enough about this. So this is one of the concerns that's currently out there. So we all need to have a more informed discussion about this. And it wasn't until you actually go in and start doing your own reading and a little bit more kind of investigation that some of the stuff comes to bear. All right, so this is kind of point number one. We need more awareness about what these products mean, and cannabis is not cannabis is not cannabis, that there's a lot of subtleties underneath there. And just like you would know, the wine aficionados out there, the enophiles, yes, you would tell me, oh yes, I like a Merlot with the smoky, and it's got to be Napa Valley. And then somebody over here will say, you don't know what you're talking about. It's a French Beaujolais, and it's got to be like this. The thing you're drinking is crap. And then the South American will tell me it's a Malbec. If you're having the steak, it's got to be a Malbec, and it's got to be like this. So you've got strong opinions and lots of experience on which kind of red wine to choose. Maybe some of you have that knowledge and experience around cannabis, but many of us don't. But we can go buy stuff. And that to me is a little bit scary, because we haven't even talked about the heart yet, have we? Because there are many potential health applications, and it can be very alluring, right? This is one of the most complete medical summaries of the health applications of cannabis and related substances. And it appeared in this very kind of prestigious medical publication from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine in the US. A very large compendium. It's like the encyclopedia of why cannabis might be good for you. Okay? So I'm not going to go through the encyclopedia right now, but just to say there are lots of interest in this. My question for the next little while, is it safe for the heart? Just because they say there's lots of good things that could happen, should we be not only aware what the products are, because that's complex, but what might happen to the heart? You with me? Still? Okay, we're weaving an interesting story? I hope so. So here we're going to go through our 4 stories. Number 1 is my 65-year-old man who comes in for a stress test. He uses an oil BID. And what if he told you that the oil was only CBD, pure CBD? Are you more concerned about his heart or less concerned about his heart? Less concerned, probably. Okay. He took a hit in the parking lot, and he tells you it was an indica. So he says it's okay. Are you more concerned about the heart or less concerned about the heart? Remember, indica, India, Kush Mountains, low to the ground, kind of chill, kind of relaxed. So maybe because he knew a lot more about his cannabis than I did, that I should listen to him and say, okay, this is kind of chill. Whereas the first time we ever see somebody with this, we actually don't know. It's cannabis, oh my God. But maybe it's not so bad. But wait. Should we ask some questions? Should we have some concerns? So this was another nice medical review article about the effects of cannabis on the heart. And it kind of, in a figure, told us about some of the things that we should be kind of mindful of if someone is smoking cannabis, at least in the short term. And what the research has shown is that if you smoke cannabis, that it can cause some potentially hazardous effects on the heart and the vascular system. Number 1 is that smoke and larger amounts of THC can place some stress It's called oxidation or inflammation of the body. It makes the body angry in a way. It stresses out the heart. It stresses out the blood vessels. That can lead to inflammation, blood sticking together, the sympathetic nervous system getting activated. Remember sympathetic nervous system? Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, you get ready to fight something. So if somebody comes in, then I'm going to expect them to be a little bit jazzed up if they just had some smoke. And it can also lead to some changes in the heart rate and rhythm, okay? And if I actually ask you that question cold, I went and smoked this mystery substance and I'm coming to see you, what might I look like? And the answer might be, I might be kind of jazzed up like this. And that's kind of the answer. So we have to be mindful of that. There's not a lot of medical literature to look at, but there is a little bit. And you have to go far back. So as Rob said, because this substance was illegal and still is in most of the United States, that there's only a few small studies because it's hard to do medical research with illegal substances. But in 1991, somebody did this interesting study where they got 13 young guys, paid them to smoke a joint, and then they watched what happened to them. Over a period of 30 minutes, they could actually measure the amount of THC. And you can see that the THC level spikes really high shortly after smoking a cigarette. It gets into the body really, really quickly. And when the THC is really, really high, the red line shows heart rate that spikes up, and the green line shows effects on the brain or measures of intoxication. So those things go up really, really rapidly, and then it takes a couple of hours for this to come back down. All right, so if someone comes in to the hospital or your clinic or dinner and they said, I just smoked a joint, then these are some of the things that we need to be mindful of. This doesn't sound so bad, does it? But what if we extend this out? What if you actually lived with heart disease? And here was an interesting study that was actually published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the most prominent medical journal that we have. This was from 1974, so pretty old. And they found 10 people with angina. And they were also asked to smoke marijuana cigarette or a placebo cigarette. And they watched what happened to them over the next hour. And not surprisingly, heart rate goes up and the stress on the heart as measured by heart rate and blood pressure went up. If you actually measured carbon monoxide in the bloodstream, it went up because you're smoking things, which is not a good thing. And if you looked at stress on the heart, it went up as well, which is not a good thing. If you measured the amount of oxygen that was being delivered to the heart, it went down, and it reduced the time before this person experienced angina by about half. This to say that there's probably a reason that we can stress out the heart by smoking cigarettes and smoking marijuana as well, okay? In another larger study where they looked at people who had actually experienced a heart attack, about 4,000 people, they asked, did you, in your background, smoke marijuana? And particularly, did you smoke it in close proximity to your heart attack? So people who admitted to smoking marijuana more than once a week, their risk of dying from their heart disease was about 4 times higher than non-marijuana smokers. And if you had it within 1 hour, if you had your heart attack, or if you smoked your marijuana cigarette within the hour, your risk of your heart attack was significantly higher as well. So there seems to at least be an association between bad things happening to your heart and smoking things, including marijuana. In this larger study from the United States, where they looked at 200,000 cannabis, quote, abusers versus 10 million non-cannabis users, they found another interesting relationship. In the green bars are the risk of having a heart attack if you're a cannabis user. In the blue bars are the risk of having a heart attack if you're not a cannabis user. This is the age categories broken into 5 years. So if you follow the blue line, first of all, what do you notice? As we get older, the risk of heart attack goes Up. Unfortunately, age is our biggest factor that drives the risk of heart attacks. But interestingly, in the green lines, you'll see that it kind of goes up and then goes down again. And the green bars, whenever the green bar is higher than a blue bar, that means the cannabis users have some extra risk associated with them. The green bars are higher than the blue bars at all age groups until we reach about 65, when age takes over. And for the young people in particular, so 30-year-olds have no business having heart attacks, I'm afraid, unless you're really unlucky for some reason. But in this case, the 30-year-olds had a 4-time higher risk of having a heart attack if they were a cannabis user. All right, so it makes us concerned about something going on here. And not only that, it leads to story number 2 of the 35-year-old guy who goes into the emergency department with terrible chest pain after smoking a joint. They do the electrocardiogram that all of you are familiar with, and what they find is, well, Rob will recognize this, and Leslie and Denise, that, boy, this cardiogram is very, very abnormal. If you see this, all the alarm bells go off, that there's a heart attack happening right in front of our eyes, and indeed, that's what they thought. So immediately the cardiology group comes down, and they took an ultrasound picture of his heart at the same time, just to see, because they couldn't believe this 35-year-old guy was having this major heart catastrophe going on. What they found with his heart was this, which is very, very unusual. So let me introduce you to one little bit of Japanese. Takutsubo. What does takutsubo mean, anybody? Takutsubo literally translates to octopus trap. And why do they say takutsubo? Because the shape of this heart, normally this is lovely, streamlined like a cone. That's the way the heart is shaped, and it beats like a cone. Expands and contracts. This, you see, is shaped like a vase or a pot. And in Japan, they put these pots in the ocean. Octopi will climb into them, and they won't come back out. So you pull up the pot, and you got yourself an octopus. Happy dinner. The heart is not meant to look like an octopus pot. It's meant to look like a nice, lean, mean cone. The odd thing about this stress cardiomyopathy, it's recognized as a syndrome. Another name for this in North America is, because we don't like Takotsubo syndrome, we call this broken heart syndrome. And it happens characteristically in middle to older age women. Nope, don't want to be pejorative here. But middle-aged women under terrible stress may end up in the emergency department with what looks like a heart attack, and this is the condition that they might have. What's interesting is that in the last few years, that there are a number of younger men coming to hospital with this syndrome called Takotsubo, or broken heart. And it relates to what? Smoking cannabis. Interesting. It wasn't there before, but now this thing is going on. So we got this kind of cascade of something going on in cannabis users, particularly the young who are using this more, don't have other heart risk factors, but they're coming up with these kinds of issues. Not only that, they might see this, and this would be another rhythm that would really get Rob excited. If anybody saw this thing, so you see this kind of waveform on electrocardiogram, you see it's wide, it's scary, it looks like a sawtooth kind of thing. This is called ventricular tachycardia. This is the heart in real distress. We don't ever want to see this. But again, in the emergency department, they've seen young men in particular coming to the hospital with this. Sometimes this happens in people with inherited conditions, abnormalities. Typically, it happens in older people who have had 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 different heart attacks in the past. So this is something that's going on. In this particular case, they could show that this rhythm, they could bring it on as long as there was cannabis or THC floating in the system. Interesting. So those are my stories of younger people. What might happen in the future? 75-year-old man actually relayed this story. He was had his heart attack about 6 months ago. He was admitted to the hospital up in cottage country because he was totally confused. His family had sent him there. His heart was racing. And is this cannabis related? Well, other people get confused and other people get racing heart. The only thing he said on questioning was he had this chocolate bar. But he had this chocolate bar because it was sitting in the fridge. And the only odd thing was that his son or grandson was at the cottage the weekend before and left him a gift of a chocolate bar in the fridge. Now, if you're eating a Kit Kat bar, can you ever stop at one? One stick? No? 1, 2, 3, 4, especially if it's a nice chocolate, right? And the thing with edibles, of course, is that you don't feel this. The concern about edibles that will be coming to the market, and these are products that are available in Colorado right now, right? Colorado has had legalized cannabis for many years now, is that you'll see that deliberately people packaging edible cannabis products, for some reason, will make products that are called things like Keef Cats and Oreos, not Oreos, or Butterfingers instead of Butterfingers. So there's some deliberate play on creating edibles that actually look, for all intents and purposes, like the things that we eat. And the thing with edibles is, because you're not inhaling it, hitting your brain, is that you can eat one and you have no effect except it tastes like chocolate, and you can never stop at one. So by the time you've eaten 4 sticks, you still don't have an effect, but 2 hours later is when this stuff kicks in and you become confused and your heart starts to race. So we saw this curve before. If you smoke THC, that you get your peak very, very rapidly. With edibles, the peak doesn't come for 3 hours later, when you might get it hit all at once. So we need to be mindful and thoughtful about this. And the emergency folks from Colorado have just published this study last month, where they talked about people coming to the emergency department with cannabis-related events. They show that over a 5-year period, that the number of visits to the emergency department have been going up steadily. Most people choose to smoke their cannabis in Colorado, and it's probably going to be true in Canada as well, just because that's the way that it's used. So there's going to be more events with inhaled, but you can see that the number of events with edible products also goes up. And the interesting thing is that for things like heart conditions, it's actually more likely that you'll land in the hospital after having eaten something than smoking something. Because if you smoke something, you get a pretty rapid feedback to say, don't have any more of this stuff before your heart kicks in. With edibles, you just may choose to eat more and more until it's too late. So actually, if you have two brownies, it doubles the risk of intoxication, psychiatric symptoms, and these heart kinds of things going on. All right, so be mindful, be cautious, counsel your friends. In October, when all these edibles become available, this is the world that we're going to face. And of course, they're available now. I'm sure somebody could find them. This nice cartoon kind of highlights all of the different things that have been observed in the medical literature. We've talked about a few of them, including that octopus trap, that Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. At the bottom, those cases of heart attacks and chest pain and angina that might happen. But there's other things that might also occur, including those rhythm disturbances. So, is it safe for the heart? Probably largely okay. But there are some people that will get into trouble. We need to be really aware of this sort of stuff before this gets more widely distributed. Finally, story number 4. We're okay? Time out, sir? When someone asks me what's the best pot for me, you might say, I'm very learned. I've read a great deal. I can tell you the answer. Well, I'd like you to pick a nice kush, because that's kind of relaxing for you, and try to have more CBD in it, will you? Don't want that THC to mess up your head. Keep it nice and calm, right? Does that sound good to you? Start with a low dose. I don't want you to have that high dose stuff. Oh, well, don't smoke things, because smoking is a bad thing. So have some oil. Just have some CBD oil, okay? That's going to be good for you. You with me? Is that the whole story, though? Because maybe there's more to this story. So if I told you this kind of story, and some of us are living with heart conditions and diabetes and high blood pressure and stress, and we might be on all of these standard kinds of medications. Denise, have you seen people on this smattering of medicines? This sounds pretty common, right? This would be a common kind of scenario. So let me share maybe some other thoughts about what this interaction might entail. So number one, if my grandmother asked me what's the best pot for me, I'd say, Granny, number one is this ain't the same pot. What you grew up with in the 60s or 70s is not the same pot, right? And you've probably heard this in the news on different occasions, that in the 1960s and 70s, the pot that was around had about 2% THC. Increasingly over a couple of decades, we now have the pot concentrations go up to 20%. On the Ontario Cannabis Store, you can order products that are 20% plus. And then, being the creative chemists that they are, interesting drug aficionados will offer you a product that's 30, 40, 50, even 90% THC. People are dying of THC overdose. You can actually do that. So it's not the same pot. That's number one. Number two, I ask you this question. Oh, you should be horrified. You should all be gasping. Oh, in horror, in terror. What has he shown me? I've shown you the grapefruit. Now, why do I show you the grapefruit vis-a-vis the medicine cocktail? Anybody? Has anybody counseled you that the grapefruit might be dangerous or even deadly to you? So if you are scared of the grapefruit, you should also be scared of the pot. Why? What's the deal with grapefruit? Anybody know? Increases the intensity of the statin is one kind of answer. Absolutely. So what's the deal with grapefruit? So drug metabolism 101 is that if we ingest a medication, it gets chewed up in your mouth or your stomach, ground up, gets picked up by the blood circulation, gets taken to the liver. And the liver's job is to transform that medicine into a form where it can actually have its effect and then get out of the body. Otherwise, all the medicines will just build up inside of you. The interesting thing that happens along the way is that many drugs will go through some kind of change. So it's stylized here as the pink medicine gets transformed by this factory that's called P450. And it's changed into a form that's here green or green and purple that can actually be eliminated through the kidneys. Are you with me on this? That's the liver's function vis-a-vis medications. So remember this P450, that's the major factory. Why do we care? Because grapefruit has in it a substance, 3,6-dihydroxybergamotrin. That's way more detail than you ever wanted. But I could just put a big grapefruit right here and it would block that pathway. Which means that the drug just builds up in your system, like the statin drug, like the calcium channel blocker drug. All right? That's one of them. P450 as the central thing. And this is the thing to keep in mind. Anyone recognize this? What the heck is he telling? This is in Brussels. This is the mannequin piece, yes? This is, and some of us know this too well, for the drugs that you are taking. This may be you every morning, right? But this is the body's function, right? If we ingest a medication, you're supposed to pee it out. But there are some substances that don't necessarily make us stop peeing, but it stops us peeing the drugs out. And that's what grapefruit is. That is also what CBD is. So I might have given you the nice answer, the learned answer about cannabis, and I'd say choose the CBD oil because that's nice and friendly for you. But CBD, that is not well known by anybody, except a few Japanese labs, CBD is a very potent inhibitor of CYP3A4, which is the same thing that grapefruits do. They block calcium channel blockers. They block some statins. But they, as a bonus, they also block another important pathway called 2D6, which metabolizes drugs that we take for depression, drugs that we might treat schizophrenia, beta blocker drugs, as well as opioid drugs like codeine. So, if I show you back this medicine profile, which looked very thoughtful, which was evidence-based, this is the best drugs that I have for you, but if I innocently say, take some CBD, because that's good for your pain, what I have inadvertently done potentially is messed up every single drug on this board. I have increased the amount of metoprolol that will be in your bloodstream. That'll slow your heart rate. I've increased the amount of amlodipine in your system that will drop your blood pressure. I have maybe tenfold increased the amount of statin in your system that will cause you all kinds of muscle aches. I've doubled the amount of amitriptyline, and we know if you take too much amitriptyline, that actually leads to very dangerous heart rhythms. And by the way, the codeine that you were taking for your pain, it actually doesn't work anymore because I've blocked the body's ability to transform that stuff into something that actually works. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? So who the heck has told you about this before? Go to the Ontario Cannabis store and see. It doesn't ask you if you're taking medications. It doesn't ask you for any of these sorts of things. But now you know, right? So one of the answers about taking anything, including this plant called cannabis, who should you talk to? Don't talk to me. Who should you talk to? You should talk to your doctor, talk to your pharmacist, right? It's okay to have the conversation. In fact, it's really good to have the conversation. There are good reasons to be using some of these products, but we just need to be really thoughtful about it and just be aware. Is this okay for my heart? Is this going to interact with anything that's going on? Is it going to cause more chest pain? Is it going to cause a weird electrical rhythm in my system? So cannabis use is growing. It's going to go. It's going to keep taking off. It's going to be a very interesting society that we're in. Remember that THC is the stuff that's active on our brain. CBD may be the balancing stuff. And the amount of one to the other is really, really important in terms of the balance. Be careful, because we can get a lot of THC, just like we don't reach for a vodka first thing in the morning, or maybe you do, I don't know, I'm not judging, but that may not be the best thing that you want to do. And for the most part, most of the cannabis, the experienced cannabis prescribers would recommend, if you're seeing them for some condition, then they're probably going to be recommending a CBD dominant product. But you've now got some extra information. If you're taking a long list of other medicines, just be thoughtful about those kinds of things. There are many reasons why people are using cannabis products. Be thoughtful about that. Don't smoke it if you can't. If at all possible, don't smoke it. But on the other hand, if you're taking edibles, just be careful about that, right? Don't overdose yourself because it's easy to overdose on that sort of stuff. When it comes to the heart, I think what I've told you is there's really not any evidence of benefit for the heart. There isn't anything good about THC and the heart. There isn't anything good about CBD and the heart. So you're not taking it for your heart per se. You may be taking it for other reasons, and your heart has to be okay with that. And you need to be okay with that. There's going to be a lot of research, and I think this is an interesting area for us. I'll stop there. And I'll take some questions on the record and then off the record. Any questions on the record? We'll go around this room. Okay, sir. Yeah, so the question was, you can get CBD from the marijuana cannabis plant. You can also get it from hemp plant. I think that's what you said. Are the drawbacks the same? And for what I understand, it's the CBD itself. It's not the cannabis that might, for instance, have those drug interactions and things. But no, there's a lot more that we need to understand about that. So just be thoughtful about that. And if you're on certain kinds of medications, that's where it seems, for me, the concern would pop up. If it's balanced in your situation, cool. Do I have a printout of this whole lecture?
Printed this whole lecture, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't have a printout for you right now, but I do have a video for you that will be posted right up on takechargeonline.ca.
Okay.
How's that?
That will be wonderful.
That's even better. You get to see me again. That's so fantastic. I'm so handsome, yes. Sir?
When you found out all this information and you had already gone on the Ontario store website, did you decide to let them know about all these things?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a great question. And I think my job will be to loop back. It's interesting. I was just on the radio on Saturday talking about this stuff. I think there's opportunity for us to loop back, do lots of education of ourselves, and I think we should have those conversations. Be better informed all the way around. Great. Thank you for that. 1, 2, 3. I'll come back this way, please. I'm sorry to point, by the way.
Peter has been referred by our family doctor to a clinic which is doctors run, and they prescribe the hybrid yellow oil, which comes from Spectrum, and it's without THC, so, and they give you the amount which you have to start with. It's a small syringe. You start with 0.5 ml under the tongue, and then he has to see the doctor every 3 months, and they check his urine and blood pressure, asked if he has any dizziness, and he also has the medication sheet of Peter, what he has
Great.
to take. They change the the blood thinners.
Okay.
And so I was wondering why, and apparently we found out these clinics are operating since 2001.
Okay, so thank you for that point. And I think that if I wrap the question around, it's around medical marijuana clinics. Like with all kind of medical care, there's really excellent care that we can seek in different kind of settings, and it sounds like you've had a really great interaction with someone who's very knowledgeable about products, who will look carefully at your conditions, who will actually see you face to face as well, which I think is really important. But you know, I think that so some of us live with very complex situations, and I'm glad that you've had a good experience. So yes, medical marijuana has been available legally for many years in Canada. The new legalization that happened was for recreational, so anybody can get it anywhere. What I like about the medical system is that somebody very thoughtful will work with you, see you, talk with you, look at your medicines, look at your conditions, figure out what's the best approach to finding the right product with you, making adjustments in medication so that there isn't interference, looking for an outcome as well, which I think is really, really good. And people are using this for various reasons, whether it's to improve symptoms, remove some medicines, which is very, very nice, because we'd like to take less medicines if possible. So I think that's great, and you've got that good therapeutic relationship and a good thoughtful one, and I think that's the right way to do it. Where I'm concerned is that we don't need that anymore, right? We can all, quote, self-medicate if we wanted to, which is kind of scary. Madame.
I was taking CBD oil for arthritis, and then when I had my heart issue and was put on all the medications, I went to the pharmacist and said, is there a conflict? And I was told, we don't know. We don't have any information for you. So I made an appointment back at the medical clinic, the marijuana clinic that I was going to, and I made an appointment with the doctor there. And he went through the medications that I was on, and he said, you're right, you can't take this. And the other thing that I was concerned about but didn't get an answer was the amount of, because I was at the point where I was building up the oil that I was using, my quantities, and I was concerned about the amount of coconut there, the oil that I was also ingesting every day, now knowing that I had a heart condition. So that was the other thing, that nobody there could give me an answer on that.
Yeah, so that's great. Thank you for sharing that. This group really wants to share, which is lovely. Once again, another good interaction with a kind of established cannabis clinic and a very experienced physician, medical lead who can actually look at the products. They've got awareness of this stuff, right? But there are not very many people who have this sort of awareness. So I'm glad that you had that outcome. And like any medicine that we may have that question about, there's the active substance, but what's around it as well. So oils or capsules, maybe one way of packaging that into a slightly more concentrated fashion. Okay, back to 3 rows, please. Yes, so the question is about what about topical preparations, oils, wraps, liniments, and this sort of thing. So there is some absorption, and it's variable. I don't think that these are products that are well characterized in terms of how much they penetrate versus having local kind of action. So I think it's more variable. Once again, I would go to reputable, well-established kind of prescriber and a good licensed producer that have both quality control on the products that they are using and selling, to see what the best products for you might be. In general, if we're putting things on the skin, there's going to be less penetration, less effect on the body. But just bear in mind that you want to do things as safely as possible. So talk about it. Yeah, so the licensed producers that are on the Ontario Cannabis Store have been selected, at least in the first pass, because they do meet certain criteria that the government has deemed appropriate for use. I'm being careful with the words that I'm using. But that's one of the qualifications of why legalization might be in advance, is that theoretically the stuff that you're getting should have a label on it that says, if it says 5% THC, it should be 5% THC plus or minus a little bit, versus the stuff that you buy out of the back of a van that you may not know what that stuff is. Okay, I'm gonna come back to the middle, Madame. Okay, so the comment was, so some of us have never used, some of us never will. The information may still be of value for all of us. Okay, going to fly across the front. Yes, sir. So thanks for sharing. Again, too much sharing. Some people are taking strong pain medicines, and you'd rather find an alternative if at all possible. And for some people that works. Each of us is very individual in what works for pain. Some are quite fine with acetaminophen. Some are okay with ice and rest on a periodic basis. Some are truly helped by cannabis products, in particular CBD, in particular, if it doesn't interfere with anything else that you're on, then doing this in a smart fashion, as we've heard about, small drops of oil, build up slowly, monitor symptoms frequently, look for interactions, look for side effects, then that would be a reasonable way to go. Find somebody who you can work with and who understands you. Absolutely, I think that's great. Sir? Would I like to try a month? So the question was, would I like to try some cannabis for a month?
No, just once.
Oh, just once. Yeah. So I don't need to try it. So thank you very much for the offer. Please note, I have turned that down. But I'm glad you had a positive experience, because absolutely that each of us will have an individual experience for it. And for some, one medicine will work. For others, another medicine will work. But there's no guarantees, right? Because for some of us who have tried CBD or other things, then maybe it hasn't worked out. I'm glad it did in your situation, and it's agreeing with you, and that's terrific. I did not spend much time talking about the pain or other kinds of issues that might be addressed by that, because I think we could spend a whole other session about that, and I did that very deliberately. But I'm glad that you had a positive experience, but you've also had a good interaction with somebody who was knowledgeable, that can look at everything that you were on, that, quote, gave you a green light. That is, that it was agreeable with your medicines and the rest of your conditions, and that works out well for you. Terrific. I'm happy for you. In the back, please. So how do you find a reputable cannabis clinic? I would say go back to your family doc and see who they've developed a relationship with, just like they would with any other practitioner. Okay, so I'm going yeah, so I think that's about as much as I'll say for there, as opposed to advocating for any one particular clinic. That's probably the best thing for me to do at this point. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, so more conversation to follow. I'm delighted that there's lots of interest in this topic, but we'll close things off right now for the sake of giving you time. One of the great things about Take Charge is you appear here on site. You don't get this on video, where you get to have some interaction with each other while having some healthy snacks. So Rob, to you.
Thank you very much.